The courthouse buzzed with life on a crisp Monday morning. The hallways were a whirlwind of motion, lawyers rushing to hearings, defendants nervously clutching paperwork, and officers standing in clusters, their eyes scanning the sea of people. Conversations hummed, shoes clicked against polished floors, and the scent of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air. It was the usual start of a busy week in one of the city's most prestigious judicial centers. Amid the controlled chaos, Naomi Carter stepped through the courthouse's towering glass doors. She looked nothing like her usual self. Gone were the black robes of authority that symbolized her position as one of the most respected judges in the state. Instead, she wore a simple cream sweater, dark jeans, and flat shoes. Her hair was styled into soft curls, and she carried an unassuming tote bag. Today, Naomi wasn't Judge Carter. She was just another face in the crowd, blending in effortlessly. And her decision to go undercover wasn't random. Over the years, Naomi had become known not only for her fair judgments, but also for her dedication to justice beyond the courtroom. She had heard whispers, stories of staff treating the public with disdain, especially individuals from minority communities. She wanted to see it for herself, unfiltered and unvarnished. Today was her chance to observe the system she served from the ground up. Naomi took a deep breath as she entered the main lobby. The chatter of clerks and attorneys filled the air, punctuated by the occasional bark of an officer giving directions. Her eyes scanned the room, taking in the subtle power dynamics. It didn't take long for her to spot Officer Amanda Reed, a wide male walking exercise bike that also held a messy marker and adjustable bites. An indescribable man wearing a Christian gray, beige suit with Amanda stood by the security checkpoint, her posture stiff and her expression sharp. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a tight ponytail and her uniform was impeccably pressed. She had an air of authority, but it was tainted by something darker: arrogance. Amanda's reputation preceded her. Known among her peers for being strict, she often crossed the line into outright condescension. For Amanda, the uniform was more than a symbol of law enforcement. It was a badge of superiority. Naomi moved through the metal detector, her presence quiet and unobtrusive. Amanda's icy blue eyes caught sight of her immediately. From Amanda's perspective, Naomi was just another civilian, unimportant and undeserving of her attention or respect. "Ma'am," Amanda's voice cut through the air, sharp and devoid of warmth. "Step aside for a bag check." Naomi paused, her calm demeanor unwavering. "Is there a problem, officer?" Amanda's lips pressed into a thin line. "Just routine. Step aside." Diego winced. Naomi complied without argument, setting her tote bag on the table. She watched as Amanda rifled through it with a meticulousness that bordered on aggressive. "All clear," Amanda muttered, waving Naomi through without so much as a glance. The officer's dismissiveness was palpable. Naomi, however, remained composed. This was exactly what she had come to witness. As she moved further into the courthouse, Naomi observed more of Amanda's interactions. The officer's tone varied depending on who she was addressing. Lawyers and well-dressed individuals received curt but professional responses. Others, those who looked less polished, more vulnerable, were met with cold indifference or outright hostility. Next, Amanda barked at an elderly black man struggling with a cane. When he hesitated, Amanda rolled her eyes. "Come on, sir, we don't have all day." Right, Naomi's stomach tightened. The scene played out like many she'd heard about, but hoped were exaggerated. Watching it unfold in real time was unsettling. She made a mental note, but kept her expression neutral. But I really don't know. And I need some sort of paper trails if I go to the police or someone or send. The morning wore on, and Naomi took a seat in one of the smaller courtrooms. She watched proceedings unfold, silently noting how different staff members carried themselves. Some were professional and respectful, treating everyone with dignity. Others mirrored Amanda's attitude, their actions subtle but telling, an extra second of scrutiny for certain individuals, a lack of patience in their tone. Samantha unsympathized. By mid-morning, Naomi decided to visit the cafeteria. She was blending in well, her quiet presence going largely unnoticed. But not by Amanda. The officer spotted her again as she walked down a corridor. "Excuse me?" Amanda called out, her voice laced with suspicion. Naomi turned, her expression calm. "Yes, officer?" Amanda approached, her hand resting on her belt. "You've been wandering around a lot this morning. What exactly are you here for?" Naomi raised an eyebrow. "I'm attending some hearings. Is that a problem?" Amanda's eyes narrowed. "Just seems odd, that's all. People don't usually linger unless they have business here." Naomi held her gaze, her composure unshaken. "I assure you, officer, I belong here." Amanda's lips curled into a smirk. "We'll see about that." Naomi watched as Amanda walked away, her back rigid with self-importance. The encounter left a sour taste in Naomi's mouth, but she reminded herself of her purpose. Today wasn't about confrontation. It was about gathering the truth. As the day unfolded, Naomi's observations painted a clear picture. The courthouse operated on two tiers, one for those deemed worthy of respect and another for everyone else. It wasn't just Amanda. The culture seemed ingrained, though some staff members tried to rise above it. Naomi knew change wouldn't come easy, but she also knew where to start. Her eyes lingered on Amanda one last time, watching as the officer barked orders at another civilian. Naomi's expression hardened. The arrogance Amanda wore like armor would soon be her undoing. After processing, "I bet a lot can't be done," she said, changing her gaze to the first man. The courthouse was alive with its usual Monday morning energy. Lawyers paced the hallways, their faces buried in files. Defendants sat nervously in waiting areas, glancing at the time. Officers moved briskly between courtrooms, their radios crackling faintly. The air hummed with the tension of decisions yet to be made. Naomi Carter entered the building quietly, her steps steady and purposeful. Dressed in a simple navy blouse and black slacks, she looked like an ordinary visitor. That was exactly how she wanted it. As a respected judge, Naomi had come undercover to observe how her staff and officers interacted with civilians. Today was supposed to be an unassuming day, a chance to blend in and see things from a different perspective. At the security checkpoint, Officer Amanda Reed was on duty. Tall and imposing, Amanda exuded confidence, or perhaps arrogance. Her sharp blue eyes scanned the crowd with the precision of someone who considered every civilian a potential threat. Amanda's reputation for being tough was well known, but so was her tendency to let bias cloud her judgment. And most of the witnesses for the weekend were incorrect. Naomi approached the checkpoint, her purse in hand, ready to walk through the metal detector. Amanda's gaze zeroed in on her like a laser. "Hold on," Amanda called out, stepping in front of Naomi. Her voice was sharp, her posture rigid. Naomi paused, surprised but calm. "Yes, officer?" "Huh?" Amanda crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing. "Where are you heading?" "To observe the proceedings," Naomi replied evenly. Amanda's lips curled into a faint smirk. "Observe? That's not a valid reason to be here. Are you part of a case?" Where am I?" "No, I'm not," Naomi said, her voice steady. "I'm just here to watch." Amanda raised an eyebrow. "You're not a lawyer, and you don't look like press. You need a real reason to be in this building." "ID?" Naomi reached into her bag, pulled out her driver's license and handed it over. Amanda snatched it without a word, studying it with exaggerated scrutiny. "Naomi Carter?" Amanda read aloud, her tone dripping with skepticism. "Doesn't ring a bell," he answered. Naomi's jaw tightened, but she maintained her composure. "I assure you, officer, I have every right to be here. Amanda laughed lightly, her smirk deepening. Right, well, people like you don't just wander around courthouses without a purpose. What are you really doing here? Naomi's heart sank at the phrase, people like you. She recognized the underlying insinuation, the unspoken bias, but she didn't react. Instead, she met Amanda's gaze firmly. I've explained myself, officer, Naomi said. Now, if you'll excuse me. Amanda stepped in front of Naomi, blocking her path. Not so fast. We can't just let anyone wander around. You could be up to something. A murmur passed through the line of people waiting behind Naomi. Some craned their necks to see what was happening. Others shifted uncomfortably, pretending not to notice. I'm not up to anything, Naomi said calmly, and I'm not obligated to explain myself further. Amanda's eyes flashed with irritation. You're causing a disturbance, she said loudly, drawing more attention. Step aside. I'm not causing a disturbance, Naomi replied, her voice still measured. You're escalating this unnecessarily. Amanda ignored her. Back up, she called into her radio, her tone brisk. I need another officer at security. She. Moments later, a younger officer approached, his expression uneasy. What's going on? He asked, glancing between Amanda and Naomi. This woman is refusing to comply, Amanda said, gesturing toward Naomi. Naomi raised an eyebrow. Refusing to comply? I've done nothing but answer your questions and provide my ID. The younger officer hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Maybe we should just let her... No, Amanda interrupted. Rules are rules. She needs to leave if she can't prove she has legitimate business here. Men of the watch bellowed in response, pointing their weapons at her. Naomi took a slow, deep breath. I've told you why I'm here, officer. I'm here to observe the court proceedings. That's legitimate business. Amanda scoffed. Not good enough. Either you leave or I'll have to escort you out myself. Naomi glanced at the younger officer, who looked as though he wanted to disappear. She felt the weight of the onlookers' stares, the whispers growing louder. Her cheeks burned, not from shame, but from frustration. Fine, Naomi said, her voice clipped. If you feel so strongly about it, go ahead and escort me out. Amanda's smirk widened, clearly interpreting Naomi's words as a concession. Glad we're on the same page, she said. And the younger officer stepped forward hesitantly. Let me handle this, he said quietly to Amanda, trying to diffuse the situation. No, Amanda snapped. I'll take care of it. She reached for Naomi's arm, but Naomi stepped back, her expression sharp. Don't touch me, she said firmly. Amanda froze, momentarily caught off guard. The authority in Naomi's voice was undeniable, and for a brief moment, Amanda seemed to falter. But her arrogance quickly returned. Physically. Have it your way, Amanda said, stepping back. But don't think you're above the rules just because you're... She trailed off, the insinuation hanging in the air. Naomi turned and walked away, her head held high. She could hear Amanda muttering under her breath, the words too faint to catch, but heavy with disdain. As Naomi exited the security area, her resolve hardened. This wasn't just an isolated incident. Amanda's behavior was a symptom of a larger problem, a culture of unchecked bias and abuse of power. Naomi had seen enough. She had come to observe, but now she had a mission. Amanda Reed's arrogance would not go unchecked. Naomi wasn't just a visitor in this courthouse. She was its foundation, its leader. And soon, Amanda would learn exactly who she had dismissed so carelessly. The wheels of justice were already turning. The courthouse buzzed with its usual Monday morning energy, a mix of tense defendants, rushing lawyers, and officers on edge. Amanda Reed's sharp voice cut through the background like a blade. Her words, loud and brash, caught the attention of those nearby. And so's a miniokopini. I got a couple girl to see this week. I know you can get him into town, but he's been sort of... You really don't know when to quit, do you? Amanda snapped, her gaze locked on Naomi Carter. So, Naomi stood her ground, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to Amanda's rising aggression. Around them, several courthouse staff paused in their tracks, their eyes darting toward the confrontation. Amanda smirked, her tone dripping with condescension. People like you think you can just stroll in here, wasting our time. Newsflash, this isn't some community center. It's a courthouse. You don't belong here unless you've got a case or a record. The words hung in the air, biting and deliberate. Naomi inhaled deeply, her expression unchanged, even as Amanda's arrogance reached its peak. You should know your place, Amanda added, her voice louder now. And this isn't it. Whispers rippled through the hall. A clerk by the file room door froze, his eyes wide. An officer behind the security desk shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. No one intervened. Naomi remained composed, her hands steady at her sides. She studied Amanda's body language, the way the officer carried herself, with unearned confidence. It wasn't just Naomi who was on the receiving end of this behavior. Amanda's attitude infected the space around her, poisoning interactions with others. Naomi, he made all this glass. Oh, well. Are you done? Naomi finally said, her voice even and steady. Amanda blinked, taken aback for a moment before recovering. Excuse me? The bit it was? I asked if you were done, Naomi repeated, her tone as measured as ever. Because I've got better things to do than stand here and listen to your rants. Amanda's face reddened, but before she could respond, a young man entered the courthouse, his posture hesitant. His clothes were simple, his hands clutching a thin stack of papers. He approached the security desk cautiously, his eyes darting around nervously. What are you here for? Amanda barked, turning her attention to him. I have a hearing, the man stammered, holding up the papers. And Amanda snatched them from his hands, scanning them with a scoff. Next time, come prepared, she muttered, and don't waste my time. Naomi watched as the young man's face fell, his shoulders hunched, and he mumbled an apology before stepping back. That was the breaking point. Naomi's patience had been a conscious choice, a deliberate effort to understand the full extent of Amanda's behavior. But now, she'd seen enough. Intimate matters, she'd told Naomi, directing a nod. You may never stop eating the boiled fish. Her decision was made. Quietly, Naomi stepped away from the commotion, pulling her phone from her pocket. She dialed a familiar number, her voice low but firm. It's time, she said simply. Bring the robes. I need them here within the hour. The person on the other end didn't hesitate. Understood, they replied. Naomi ended the call and slipped the phone back into her bag. As she walked back toward the main hall, she scanned the crowd, her sharp mind piecing together the next steps. First, she would find Scott. She called him Max. He had to be far enough away to reach the cellar, so she approached him with flags saying, I need a map. Amanda was back at the security desk berating another visitor. This time it was an older woman struggling to find her paperwork. Naomi's heart tightened as she watched the scene unfold, Amanda's impatience palpable in every word and gesture. You've got to be kidding me, Amanda said, her voice loud enough for half the room to hear. This isn't my job, lady. Figure it out, or come back when you're ready. Naomi clenched her fists but forced herself to stay calm. She approached one of the clerks standing nearby. Could you do me a favor? Naomi asked quietly, her voice steady but commanding. The clerk looked up, startled but nodded. Of course. Let the presiding judge know I'll be making an announcement shortly, Naomi said, and tell them to gather the key staff in the courtroom. The clerk hesitated for a moment, as if unsure, but something in Naomi's tone left no room for argument. Right away, they said, hurrying off. Naomi took a seat on a nearby bench, her mind racing. She replayed the morning's events, from Amanda's sharp words to her demeaning treatment of others. Every interaction painted a clear picture of the arrogance and entitlement that had taken root in the courthouse. Barker came up behind her and examined her feet. Mm, you used to look so good. Mm. When her assistant arrived with the robes, Naomi felt a sense of calm wash over her. She took the black garment in her hands, the weight of it familiar and grounding. Thank you, she said softly. The assistant nodded, their expression a mix of respect and quiet anticipation. Naomi slipped the robes over her plain clothes, the transformation immediate. The soft fabric rested on her shoulders like a shield, a symbol of authority and justice. She straightened, her posture firm, and adjusted the sleeves. As she walked toward the courtroom, heads began to turn. Conversations quieted, whispers spread like wildfire. It is I can't be. Naomi ignored the murmurs, her focus unshakable. She pushed open the heavy wooden doors of the courtroom, the sound echoing through the hall. Yeah, Perias said. Wait until they've got everything on the table. Inside, the staff had already begun to gather. Clerks, officers, and attorneys filled the benches, their expressions a mix of curiosity and confusion. Amanda was there too, standing near the front with her arms crossed, her face twisted in annoyance. What's all this about? Amanda demanded, her voice cutting through the room. Naomi stepped forward, her presence commanding. She met Amanda's gaze, her expression unreadable. Naomi reached for her, shading her eyes with her hands. I'll explain, Naomi said, her voice calm but firm. Amanda frowned, her confidence faltering. For the first time that morning, she seemed unsure. Naomi turned to address the room, her voice steady and clear. Thank you all for being here. I wanted to take a moment to address something important, something I've observed firsthand this morning. The staff exchanged puzzled glances, their attention locked on Naomi. As many of you know, I've served as a judge in this courthouse for several years, Naomi continued. But today I came in undercover. I wanted to see how this courthouse operates without the influence of titles or status. Amanda's eyes widened, her arms dropping to her sides. Wait, what? She stammered. Oof. Naomi didn't pause. What I witnessed was deeply troubling. Disrespect, arrogance, a lack of basic decency. Her gaze shifted to Amanda, her tone sharpening. And you, Officer Reed, were at the center of it. The room fell silent, the weight of Naomi's words settling over the crowd. Amanda's face turned pale, her mouth opening and closing, as if searching for a response. I've seen enough, Naomi said, her voice firm. Now it's time for accountability. Amanda strode confidently through the courthouse, her sharp heels echoing against the polished floors. She waved a hand dismissively at a young man fumbling with his paperwork near the security checkpoint. Move it along, she barked, her tone dripping with superiority. Her sharp uniform and air of authority made it clear she relished her position. Leaning casually against the security desk, Amanda exchanged smirks with the junior officer. These people have no idea how to follow simple instructions, she muttered, loud enough for nearby defendants to hear. Her words carried a mix of condescension and self-satisfaction. Every interaction she had was tinged with her belief that she was the most important person in the room. That's hard to say. In the midst of the morning bustle, Amanda turned to a nervous woman juggling a stack of papers. Do you even know where you're going? She snapped. The woman stammered an apology, but Amanda had already turned away, her smug laugh echoing in the hallway. Then, the doors to the courtroom swung open. The atmosphere shifted, as if the very air had changed. Conversations stopped abruptly, and heads turned in unison. Naomi Carter stepped into the room, now wearing her judge's robes. Her presence was commanding, the flowing black garment emphasizing her authority. She moved deliberately, her gaze steady as she crossed the courtroom floor. Between us sat her parents, neither moving nor speaking. Amanda's smirk vanished the moment she saw Naomi, her body tensed, her mind struggling to connect the dots. Seconds ago, Amanda had been the self-assured gatekeeper of the courthouse, and now she stood frozen, her confidence draining away. Naomi ascended to the bench with calm precision. She adjusted her robe and turned to the room, her voice resonating as she said, "Good morning, court is now in session." Amanda felt her stomach churn. She tried to regain her composure, but the smug confidence she carried all morning had abandoned her. Her colleagues exchanged glances, some leaning in to whisper as realization dawned on them. Naomi's eyes finally landed on Amanda. The intensity of her gaze made Amanda's heart race. There was no mistaking it now. This was the same woman she had treated as a nuisance just hours ago. The courtroom was silent, every person waiting for the moment to unfold. Naomi's smile faded as she reached for her notepad and lazily put the 2 pages of information down. Amanda's world seemed to tilt as her gaze locked onto the woman now standing in judge's robes behind the bench. The confident smirk she'd worn moments ago vanished, replaced by disbelief and a creeping dread. The same person she had belittled and dismissed earlier in the day was now presiding over the courtroom, her commanding presence undeniable. Naomi adjusted her robe with calm precision, her movements deliberate. She met Amanda's wide-eyed stare, a faint expression of disapproval crossing her face. For a moment, Amanda hoped against hope that Naomi wouldn't address her. She averted her gaze, her heart pounding, but the weight of Naomi's authority made escape impossible. "Officer Reed!" Naomi's voice rang out, clear and steady, cutting through the murmurs in the room. Amanda's shoulders stiffened. All eyes turned to her, the courtroom suddenly feeling smaller and more suffocating than ever. "Naomi, yes, Your Honor," Amanda mumbled, her usual assertiveness reduced to a quiet murmur. "Humph." Naomi leaned forward slightly, her expression calm but firm. "I'd like to take a moment to address your conduct earlier today." The room fell silent. Naomi's voice carried a quiet power that demanded attention. Amanda's palms grew clammy as Naomi continued. "When I arrived this morning, I was subjected to behavior that was not only unprofessional, but deeply troubling. Your treatment of me and others reflects a troubling lack of respect." The weight of this statement settled over the room. Amanda opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. She glanced nervously at her colleagues, hoping for some sign of support, but was met with only blank stares and uncomfortable shifting. Naomi's gaze remained fixed on Amanda, unyielding. "You assumed my value based on appearance alone, dismissing me without cause. This is not the conduct I expect from anyone serving in this courthouse." A ripple of whispers broke out among the staff, but Naomi raised her hand, silencing them instantly. "Officer Reed, you represent not just the security of this court, but also the values we uphold here. Your actions earlier today fell far short of those expectations." Piri palmed. Amanda swallowed hard, her throat dry. The humiliation was palpable, the courtroom's silence pressing down like a heavy weight. She knew there was no justification for her behavior, and Naomi's words left no room for defense. The room remained silent as Naomi's statement hung in the air. Amanda's shock now mirrored in the faces of those around her. Some even avoided looking her way. Some allowed themselves to be confiscated. The room was heavy with tension as Naomi Carter rose from her chair, her voice carrying the authority that came with her years on the bench. Every eye in the courtroom turned toward her as she stood, calm but commanding, at the center of attention. Amanda's smugness had evaporated entirely, replaced by a pale, frozen expression. Naomi looked directly at her, her gaze steady and piercing. "This moment," Naomi began, her voice steady but filled with purpose, "is not just about the actions of one individual. It's about the values we choose to uphold as a society. Respect, accountability, and fairness are not optional. They are non-negotiable. Thank you for the offer, I suppose. By the way, I'm going to be out of town for the next couple of weeks. I'll take care of it." Thank you. I often find that Amanda shifted uneasily, the weight of Naomi's words pressing down like a physical force. The rest of the courtroom was silent, captivated by the judge's presence. This morning, I entered this courthouse not as Judge Carter, but as an observer, Naomi continued, her tone sharpening slightly. I wanted to see firsthand the behavior and attitudes of those who serve our justice system. What I encountered was not just disappointing, it was unacceptable. Um, uh, how would I put it? She paused, her words hanging in the air, giving them time to sink in. Amanda's discomfort was evident, her eyes darting to the floor. Naomi took a step closer to the bench, addressing the room with an unwavering voice. You see, Priscilla. Officer Reed, Naomi said, turning directly to Amanda. Your behavior this morning demonstrated a clear disregard for the very principles you are sworn to uphold. You chose arrogance over humility, condescension over compassion. Your actions were not just an insult to me, but to every individual who seeks fairness within these walls. Amanda tried to stammer out a defense, but Naomi silenced her with a raised hand. No excuses, Officer Reed. Accountability starts here and now. The room remained deathly quiet as Naomi's voice softened but carried no less weight. This courtroom is a place where everyone, regardless of status, background, or role, deserves respect, and that includes those who serve it. Toxic behavior has no place here, and I will not tolerate it under any circumstances. Naomi took a deep breath, her tone resolute. Effective immediately, your conduct will be subject to a formal review. Changes are not a suggestion, they are a necessity. In a future context, the finality in Naomi's voice left no room for argument. The silence in the courtroom was deafening, broken only by the subtle shifting of chairs as everyone absorbed her words. It was a moment no one would forget. Naomi's voice remained steady and commanding as she addressed the courtroom, her eyes never leaving Amanda. Officer Reed, she began, her tone sharp yet controlled. You are hereby ordered to step down from your duties immediately, pending a full investigation into your conduct. Your actions today have shown a blatant disregard for the values this courthouse stands for. Amanda's face drained of color, her hands trembling slightly as she processed Naomi's words. Whispers rippled through the courtroom, staff and spectators exchanging shocked glances. Amanda opened her mouth to protest, but quickly closed it, knowing there was no room for excuses. Naomi continued, her tone firm but resolute. As a judge, my responsibility is not just to preside over cases, but to ensure this courthouse remains a place where justice is not only done, but seen to be done. Everyone, regardless of their appearance, role, or background, deserves respect within these walls. She glanced around the room, her eyes meeting those of several courthouse staff members. Some looked uncomfortable, their expressions reflecting quiet self-reflection. Others nodded slightly, recognizing the truth in Naomi's words. Amanda's voice finally broke the silence, shaky but defiant. Your Honor, I didn't mean any harm. It was a misunderstanding. Naomi's gaze hardened. A misunderstanding, Officer Reed, is not what I witnessed today. What I saw was a pattern of behavior, dismissiveness, arrogance, and outright disrespect. You treated me, and likely others, based on assumptions and prejudice. That is not acceptable. The room grew quieter, the weight of Naomi's words settling over everyone present. Amanda's shoulders slumped as the reality of her situation became inescapable. Naomi shifted her focus to the broader audience in the room. This incident is a wake-up call for all of us. Prejudice, whether overt or subtle, erodes the foundation of justice. As of today, this courthouse will implement mandatory inclusivity and bias training for all staff and officers. We will not let complacency allow toxic behaviors to flourish. George, a murmur of agreement passed through the crowd. Several staff members exchanged uneasy looks, while others nodded in approval. Naomi's words were not just directed at Amanda, they were a challenge to everyone in the room to reflect on their own actions and biases. One of the junior clerks, a young man with a hesitant expression, raised his hand slightly. "Your Honor," he began timidly, I think this is something we all need. I've seen things here that didn't feel right, but I didn't speak up. I regret that. I'm a physical." Naomi acknowledged him with a small nod, her expression softening slightly. "Acknowledging the need for change is the first step," she said. "It's not enough to regret. We must act. Together, we can rebuild a culture where everyone feels valued and respected." Amanda remained silent, her head bowed in shame. The gravity of her actions had not only damaged her reputation, but also left a lasting impact on her career. Naomi's firm but fair approach made it clear that accountability was non-negotiable. And Naomi concluded her address with a hopeful tone. "Let today mark the beginning of a new chapter for this courthouse. Change is never easy, but it is necessary. It starts with each of us examining our actions, our words, and our attitudes. Let's ensure that no one who walks through these doors feels less than they are." The room erupted into soft applause, a signal of support for Naomi's leadership and vision. As Amanda was escorted out of the courtroom to begin her suspension, the remaining staff began to disperse, their expressions a mix of contemplation and determination. Naomi took a moment to breathe, feeling the weight of her words settle over her. Change wouldn't happen overnight, but she was confident it had begun. This was more than a consequence for Amanda, it was a call to action for everyone in the courthouse. Naomi walked slowly through the courthouse halls, her footsteps echoing softly against the polished floors. The building, bustling as always, seemed to hum with a different energy today. For the first time in a long while, Naomi felt a sense of hope. Change was in the air, and it was long overdue. She glanced around, observing the faces of her colleagues and staff. Some looked reflective, others determined. Naomi knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Changing a culture steeped in bias and complacency required persistence, but she was confident they had taken the first step. Her undercover experience, though challenging, had been worth every moment. It had uncovered a deep-rooted issue that could no longer be ignored. A young clerk approached her, his expression tentative but warm. "Your Honor," he began, his voice steady but laced with emotion, "I just wanted to say thank you for everything. I don't think anyone else would have done what you did. It means a lot." Naomi smiled gently. "Thank you," she replied. "But this isn't just about me. It's about all of us. We have the power to make this courthouse a place where everyone feels respected, no matter who they are. Let's work together to make that happen." The clerk nodded, his confidence bolstered by her words. As he walked away, Naomi noticed a small group of junior staff whispering nearby. One of them, a woman who had been visibly shaken during the earlier courtroom events, approached her hesitantly. I just wanted to say," the woman stammered, "it's inspiring to see someone stand up for what's right. It gives me hope for this place." Naomi placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Thank you. Remember, you have a voice too. Never hesitate to use it." As the staff dispersed, Naomi made her way to her courtroom. The space felt different now, almost lighter. She paused for a moment, taking in the view of the empty benches and the judge's bench waiting for her. This was where justice was served, a place that symbolized fairness, accountability, and integrity. And now, thanks to today's events, it felt like it was becoming that place again. I'm sorry, I'm not sure why it feels different now, Dessa, but it does. It almost... She paused again. Place I scratched my head of a few just. Naomi ascended the steps to the bench and took her seat. Her robes settled around her, a tangible reminder of the responsibility she carried. Looking out across the empty room, she felt a quiet satisfaction. This wasn't just about holding one person accountable. It was about setting a standard for everyone who entered this courthouse. Put yourself in the way of life and be ready to be summarily thrown at, my father had said. If you're tiptoeing, don't do it. The story wasn't over. There was still work to be done. But as Naomi sat there, a symbol of justice and integrity, she knew that respect and fairness would always prevail. This was just the beginning of a new chapter, one that promised hope and change for everyone.